So welcome. So I'll jump in. Hopefully I won't go too long. I'll try to, it's just like, but I want to tell a story. So this is part of it's just like this, some of what I'm going to share with you, part of a paper working on with Eng and also with Susie Jarvis, just to give credit there. So for me, this is part of a journey. This is what it's just like brought me to Ireland. Many of you may think it's like it was the weather, that I'm originally from California, and so I would come to Ireland for the weather, but no, well, maybe that's one, but that I was working actually in Pennsylvania, and we had a school of sustainability in a 400-acre campus, and we did lots of experiential learning, and I started to integrate design thinking into my teaching, and it worked really well. And I was really happy with that. But the problem was I didn't quite understand, why it was working. And I wanted to understand better so I could, with more intention, apply it, because I felt it worked really well. And, okay. So can you hear the audience?
Sorry. Just trying to get the Zoom screen back up.
And
I think
I can talk
the
in the back.
mic be picked up. Just a minute.
All right. So again, to understand, and the job I currently have, I work at Innovation Academy as education innovation lead, and basically it's about, I had the chance to combine sustainability and design thinking. So problem statement, and I'll come back to this a couple of times, so I'll only read it off this time. Educators need, it's just like pedagogies to develop mindsets and confidence to tackle complex challenges when knowledge is contested, because sustainability transitions require students to transform their internal and external worlds. Besides this practical experience, it's like, where did that come from? Again, if you look in the literature, a lot of the times in our own experience through, it's like either directly or indirectly, that we're preparing knowers and not change makers, or we've been prepared as knowers and not change makers. And in a sense that it's like, what is a change maker? People with a bias to action, strong sustainability values, and a wide range of skills and abilities, basically to affect transitions to sustainability. And if you think about knowers, it's like, if we look forward, what's going to happen with our teaching practice, that, you've got, and I'm looking at the positive side of ChatGPT. You've got ChatGPT, you have Google, information is low cost and cheap and easy to get. And so it's like, really the trick isn't just giving information to students. It's like, okay, how do we prepare them to actually act on that information, prepare them to be change makers? Then we have this idea, it's like around sustainability, incremental versus transformational. And so, part of this is we frequently, it's just like prepare, and I've taught in business schools, it's just like people to go out and get jobs, but we're preparing them to fit into the same sort of economy and system, etc. And it's like, so we have to look deeper. How do we look at transformational learning so that they're also transforming their values? And how do we integrate that into our teaching? Experiential learning versus transformational. So that when I started, this was part of what brought me here. Did lots of experiential learning, and it was great. And I didn't quite understand why it was working. It's like, yes, I know the theories around it. It's like people convert experience into knowledge, and that was fine and good. But there was something else happening. It was like looking at whole students and not just, part of the students, looking at how were they changing their values, their judgments, etc. When you started, one of the challenges we faced when you look at transformational learning, the kitchen sink is there because everything is defined as transformational learning. And so that's one of the challenges also, to define it down and say, okay, what do we mean by transformational learning? And what do we mean in a way that others can build on the practice? And if you haven't noticed, I'm big on practice. It's like, okay, there's nice theories, really, they should be helping us improve our practice versus just confusing us and not helping. And then lastly, everybody that's in a discipline thinks there's a definition for sustainability, but there really isn't. It's a contested concept, and we forget that. And so in our particular disciplines, we may go and we approach students and say, this is sustainability, but it isn't. You know, if we needed a reminder, this is a clipping from this morning's newspaper. You know, demonstration in Oslo seeks to remove wind farms from indigenous regions. So there is no, it's like, it's very contextual. And so our teaching also has to embrace that. So then basically this became, it's like the problem statement that we needed a transformational pedagogy to, it's just like to address the problem that we had. So what we did is we developed a year ago a professional diploma in innovation for sustainability. And the idea is it's a 20 credit, about 8-month program. And the first part, we just teach them creative thinking and ground them in design thinking. And we tell them that that's the foundation that they'll be using throughout. So the second module, we give them, signpost them the big ideas in environmental issues. And again, grounded in design thinking, and they have to produce a climate change adaptation plan in that. And again, this is the experiential learning part that it's like, they're not just learning the theory, but they're actually having to apply it. And then next part, it's like human drivers for innovation. And it's for those of you that are familiar with governance aspects, it's more governance, teaching them the social structures and behaviors that keep sustainable or lack of sustainability in place. And then they do about a 3-month project where they do a project of their choosing and they develop it out. And so then they go through this process, and design thinking is on the spine of that. So then it's like, all right, what we're looking at, it's like for researchers, design thinking as a transformational pedagogy. And it's like, okay, what are the parts of this? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through, it's like a series of slides and tell you, it's just like the different parts, and then bring it back together at the end and how it might help in practice, if that makes sense. So ultimately, if again, this is there's practice and literature. So it's just like in practice and literature that you'll see that design thinking is intended to deliver creative confidence in students or develop it in students. And what you're seeing always at the right, that what we did is we've interviewed students, we've looked at their reflections, and we've also surveyed them that participated in this professional diploma. There were 3 cohorts, total about 104 students. And what I did excerpts from their reflections here. So that's unfiltered by us. So again, my final project on development of a cycling group is derived both from the research and lastly, most importantly, newfound confidence. And so that this is one of the critical parts we saw with design thinking, that it gives confidence to students to act on things. And this is critical for change makers because, you know, if you think about it, a classroom full of individuals, and it's like those that are confident with the knowledge, even if they have the same grade as someone else, or even somebody that has a lower grade and more confidence, you're going to get very different results there when they go into the real world. Next, it's like design thinking itself. I can see now how 2 issues of sustainability and design thinking complement each other. It supported me a process of understanding the needs of service users, researching the problem I'm trying to solve for my project, and ultimately road testing the feasibility. So it's a nice spine. I mean, in one sense, we always knew that, but it was trying to understand the different parts, and that's what I'm sharing with you today. And then, okay, a couple of steps, creating Changemakers guided mastery. So this again is something that's known about design thinking. You create guided mastery. So we do that in a couple of ways. One is the traditional way where you start out, it's like with a design sprint and you say, okay, you've got 20 minutes to design a sustainable wearable. And they go and they do it and it's very low risk and it's very defined. And then it's like we ratchet that up and, you know, at a certain point, it's like, okay, you're applying design thinking. We've explained you how, do a sustainability report now. And so it's much higher. And then even higher, it's like, all right, you've got, it's just like all this training, you've done a sustainability report for a major assessment, you've done a climate change adaptation plan for a major assessment. Now identify your own project and run that for 3 months. So, and again, the completion of the climate change adaptation plan also acted as a source of inspiration for my innovation and greener fertilizer options. And of course, design thinking in itself is the core idea behind it is guided mastery, but it's also doing that with how you structure your assessments. So important. So in design thinking, you have methods. It's just like, but also what you have to do when you're teaching sustainability is put in sustainability methods. And the trick there is not getting too much content, or at least for the class we were teaching, but it's like to give them enough that they could act, but that they weren't overwhelmed and thinking it was about a test. And so, and I'll explain next slide how we approached it. The feedback, appropriate. The final project has given me the appropriate language and knowledge around sustainability to allow me more informed decisions, influence others, and better understand that in my professional life, this was a gap previously hindered my ability to speak about sustainability. And I won't unpack this a lot. What we discovered was everybody was coming in because it had sustainability in it. They were thinking, I was like, I'm going to be a sustainability expert. And I tell them, it's like, well, I have a PhD in an area of sustainability and I'm not an expert. And it's like, really, nobody's an expert in sustainability. You're constantly learning. So what we're going to do for you is we're going to create sustainability literacy. And we identified 4 critical areas, some of it taken from literature and some of it taken from what we needed to achieve. And it's just like we said, okay, this is the literacy that you'll take away. And then the right side, what you see is, so each class, I'll go through and say, okay, here's the big topics we're covering in this class, and here's how it maps back to sustainability literacy. And so that they get a grounding. And what was nice is everyone moved away from this idea of becoming an expert, and they realized it's like, okay, it's really about literacy. And at the same time, we'll give them readings, some that are, and videos, some that are required, but many that are just like, well, if you want to learn more about this topic, you can explore it. And again, it depends on what's appropriate for what they're looking for. So another part, and this is sometimes we forget, it's like students are individuals and humans, and creating psychological safety. And so creating it on 2 levels, at least. One, individual, that they feel safe to take a chance in the class. And we have particular ways of doing that. And another is that when working in groups, that they feel safe to work in a group. And I'll talk about why that's important. So again, putting together a curriculum, creating an environment which challenged us while making us feel safe to respond to the set of challenges. And I think that that's really the critical part. And part of what we factor in is it's a pass, no pass. And so students will freak out because they're used to being graded. And it's like, how am I going to do this? It's like, don't worry. It's just like, you do well enough work, you'll pass, just get in there and give it a try. And so that really helps also. Then mindset development. And again, that is sort of a known component of design thinking. So you develop certain mindsets using that as, okay, values or principles or lenses that you approach a problem with, and that you tease them out. Some we do traditional, others we put in 3, of which I'll show you 2 of the sustainability mindsets that we work with. So one, sustainability is a verb and not a noun. And we reinforce that because, again, this idea of the contested concept, it's like to realize you're trying to move towards sustainability versus a fixed direction. And that also frees them, it's just like think more open about what a sustainability solution might look like versus, okay, this expert or that expert said something. Instead, it's like, okay, as long as I'm moving and creating a transition, that's what's important. And then preparing people for the future so that it's human-centered. So this is the classic one. I did this first internally. I said, okay, I created a persona and I said, this is Fiona. She's a single mother, and I gave some background. I'm like, what's her sustainability problem? Anyone would guess? She doesn't have one. She has life problems that she wants to solve sustainably. And so to realize it's just like, it's like you don't always think that way. We were talking earlier, it's like I bought sustainable soap that didn't actually get my clothes clean. And so in that sense, it's like, yeah, I wanted to be sustainable, but it wasn't meeting my goals that I needed to achieve. And so orienting the students towards that and getting them to reflect on it. And then it's like social learning. This was, again, it's something that we think about indirectly or unconsciously, but I didn't realize how important it was in this process to get students together, especially with the idea of sustainability, because it's contested. So you get a group of people together that comes from all different disciplines and backgrounds, and they start to talk about sustainability. And this was critical. This is a great quote. In my previous academic experience, I never opted for group work before completing this module. Having other members of the team to bounce ideas off of was useful, and I really saw the value of collaboration as part of the design thinking process. I would argue that the design thinking process works best when there's space for collaboration. And again, what's important also, sustainability problems are too complex for any one discipline to solve. And so we need that collaboration, and creating the space for social learning is critical. Last one, and then I'll bring it together. So reflection, again, we were aware of reflection, and it's like, again, that comes from experiential learning, the idea that you reflect on what you do, and then that becomes knowledge, and also that you improve on it. At the same time that we realized, linking to the social learning, the reflection, we primarily thought about it, or I did, as an individual activity. But so much of it also happens in the groups, and reflecting and trying to test ideas and bouncing off of each other. So again, reflection's a critical part. So then you've seen all these parts, but actually it's like the sum is greater than, it's just like the individual parts. And so what does that look like? I'm still developing it. I'm obviously not a graphic artist, but there you go. But so we see, it's just like the different elements. It's like the methods, the psychological safety, mindset, social learning, reflection. And it's like, if you're interested in this, it's really a scaffolded intervention, if you will, around transformational learning, because there are specific activities that you can do. And so then to bring it back to practice, what does this mean for us? So it's like, and I found myself doing this. It's like looking at, because we're running the program again this year. So I'm looking at individual classes, and it's like, oh, that ran over. I'm going to cut that. I'm going to do this. And then I reflect, and it's like, oh, well, actually, the intent on that was to create psychological safety. So if I cut that, then I'm undermining this aspect. And so it's helping me make different decisions based on, again, trying to produce this transformational learning. And so then what questions might we ask? How they, being students, how are they learning? So it's like, again, there's methods from doing the worst serial and design thinking methods to carbon footprinting that we'll do in sustainability methods. Then do they feel safe to learn? So have we created the right environment that they feel that they can ask questions and take chances? Do they have the values to learn? So this is about mindsets that we've had, hopefully no one's from engineering, but we've had engineers come in, and it's just like, well, it's like in the makerspace, talk about sustainability, and they'll say, well, we're just trained to make things cheap and fast. And so that what happens is, and it's just like, again, thinking about how the values we're putting in and the mindsets with students. Then what can they learn from each other? And then that's an important part. And so that, I didn't quite understand before how it's just like teamwork worked. And it'd be like, well, I assumed, which I still assume part of it, but I don't weight it as much. It's like, well, you have to work in teams when you go out with a job. So of course, this is good. But it's part of the learning and intellectual process and addressing contested issues. So it's like supporting the social learning aspect. And then the reflection, what did he, she, they learn? And again, that group reflection and what still needs to be learned. And so that's part of it. And again, individually or as groups. And then, okay, did we have evidence of change makers? So we ran 75 projects came out of 104 students. And this was a sample. And there are projects running from, it's just like, Fortune 500 companies running projects within the company themselves, individuals, to the local GAA club putting in strategy, to other community projects. And this idea that it's like when students came out, they had the confidence and they felt like change makers and the tools to go out and do this. And I was listening one day to the presentations and excited, and this image of a dandelion came in because some of them were small, but if everybody was making just these small changes and some of them were big and some big changes, then that has an impact. And ultimately, that's what we're wanting for sustainability, are these changes and everybody doing the changes that they can or that they're empowered to do. So this really quickly, this was one of the projects. It was a canoe club from Cork, and she wanted to look at doing a sustainability strategy for them. And so she did empathy work with members, and then they had this idea and they came up with a brainstorm and they found an artist within the canoe club. And so the artist did these original drawings and they combined them. And then it's just like it brought the whole club together. And again, I could have showed you the one from PepsiCo where they're looking at reusing spent alcohols. But I think that this is interesting. Again, it's just on a local level, inspiring people to take action in their own way. And so, here it is, idea, creating change makers, a scaffolded intervention for transformational learning. I guess a takeaway, because I'll take you to this, is, again, you can use design thinking in an interesting way. It's just like with paying attention to some of the elements here that you can, let's say, teach sustainability or parts of it. Sorry. And thank you.